Now, I have covered a lot of different enemies on this channel before in my Evolution of series, and one of the first I did was the Koopa Troopa. However, I've never really done a video on my favorite types of this enemy, and believe me, there are a lot of them, with some of the variants out there being really cool, because they have quite a diverse or special role in the games. So today we will take a look at my top 5 types of Koopa Troopas that, in my opinion, are the best Nintendo has ever created. Now let's dive in right away. Number 5. Now, to start off this list, we will be looking at a type of Koopa Troopa that is fairly unknown. I bet a lot of you haven't ever heard of it, or at least haven't seen this one in many years. And to be honest, it's quite logical because they were only seen in one Super Mario game, the first Super Mario Land title for the Game Boy. In general, this game was quite unique and weird. It wasn't even made by the standard Super Mario team. And so we got a cool but different Koopa Troopa who are known as the mighty Bombshell Koopas. Now, they are a black-shelled species of Koopa Troopa, and there are some differences between these and the normal type. These ones aren't stronger or more resilient in any way. Oh no. They don't even leave a shell behind when you jump on them. So what does make them different then? Well, when you jump on top of one of them, they leave something else behind. A bomb. Yes, they actually explode shortly after being stomped on. But the blast radius is not that big. So they are similar to the bombs, but not as deadly. And funny enough, they actually replaced conventional Koopa Troopas in Super Mario Land because it would have taken too long to program the ricochet effects of the Koopa shells on the Game Boy. I didn't even know about that. So hey, you learn something new every day. Now, they are the most common enemy in the game, appearing in all levels except for the underwater and flying level. Personally, I quite like these because they do something different for once. So in a way, it's refreshing, like a lot of the stuff seen in Super Mario Land. It was made by a different team after all. And while a bouncing shell can certainly be dangerous, this is also scary to be around. Because if you don't get out of the way, you will get blown up. Especially on small platforms, these can create some real tension and stress. If you don't continue, you're doomed. Which can be hard to do because you come across a lot of enemies in this game. And all of them are incredibly good at what they do. Personally, I find Super Mario Land quite difficult, and this Koopa Troopa certainly played a role in this. So while they are a pain, I do like them. Number 4. Now, while our last Koopa Troopa type was quite different and even a bit weird, this next one is even worse. However, while it's certainly not your standard Koopa Troopa, it has something going for itself. They are kind of comical and also hell to deal with if you don't pay attention to them. And that's because of their shocking attack. The one I'm talking about is the blue Electro Koopa, which are a type of Koopa Troopa that are only seen in Super Mario Sunshine. Now, instead of just walking around and being the victim of Mario's attacks, these go on the offensive, because they can actually throw their shells at you, which can then electrocute you. And that hurts, as you can imagine. After that, the shell returns to it like a boomerang, allowing it to do this again and again and again. As you can imagine, these can be hard to dodge, especially if one is already coming at you when you notice them. And you're doomed if you don't pay attention at all. Now, to defeat them, you can either stomp on them once they are exposed, or spray them with water for an even funnier way of taking them out, because then they get shocked by their own shell. Now, these are quite different from the normal Koopa Troopas, as you can clearly notice. Even their design is completely different. But I will say though, their look is great. They look very funny and even cartoonish, which I quite like. But aside from that, their tactics are also quite good. Because you gotta remember, enemies like the Boomerang Bro weren't seen in 3D games. So something like this was new for the 3D titles. Because Super Mario 64 didn't have anything like this. Sure, the later games had stuff like this, but in Sunshine it was new. And I gotta say, they work well in such a setting, which can also make them annoying to deal with because they are so incredibly effective. Number 3. Now for our next Koopa Troopa, we will look at one that everybody knows about. It's a classic, and that's mostly because they are seen in almost every game, and for good reason. Their concept is timeless and works in almost every Mario title you can imagine. The one I'm talking about is the Dry Bones, the skeletal version of the normal Koopa Troopa, which are mainly found in towers and castles. They first appeared in Super Mario Bros. 3, and ever since then they became a staple in the Mario franchise. Heck, even more skeletal Koopas have appeared since in the Mario games, such as a bony beetle and even Dry Bowser. This clearly shows that the concept was popular, which makes sense because both their design and tactics are iconic, unique, and effective. Now, they often collapse when attacked, but they soon revive themselves and become normal once again. So they are pretty hard to kill. Sure, some methods of attack can permanently defeat them, but there aren't many. Now, you might think that this enemy is quite boring and useless, but its role is actually quite subtle but effective. They are usually placed on small platforms, islands, anything really. As long as it's quite small, it's perfect. Because if you defeat them, they are only out of the game for a short amount of time. Soon they will be back, so you need to be fast and get out of there. Or when it's a platform that acts like an elevator, you need to constantly avoid them. But every time they keep on coming back, chasing after you constantly, which can certainly drive you mad. But that's their goal. While they aren't extremely deadly, they almost never go away, making them a constant threat. And personally, I quite like that. It's for sure a genius concept from Nintendo. Number 2. Now, sometimes Nintendo comes up with an enemy that is quite simple and maybe even useless in some people's eyes. And that's because their gimmick isn't too special, and they aren't that big of a threat in the normal levels. And I gotta say, the Koopa Paratroopas are a good example of this, but they do more than people would ever think. These are winged Koopa Troopas who can be seen flying around in a lot of 2D and 3D Super Mario levels. They usually don't do that much, but luckily enough, that's what they are supposed to do. Because they aren't really enemies. Sure, sometimes you come across them and they will be hovering up and down, kind of being in your way. However, while that can be annoying, this isn't the main reason why they are in the game. They are actually there to be used as a platform, and that's because they lose their wings when they are stomped on in the air, turning them into regular Koopa Troopas and giving you, the player, a little boost. And so typically, these guys are placed in between large gaps, allowing you to jump on one of them so you can get past these parts. And I gotta say, Nintendo uses them for stuff like this a lot, in both 2D games as well as more linear sections of 3D games. And I think that's genius. It's something so small, but works perfectly as a moving one-time platform that fits perfectly with a platforming game like Super Mario. It works especially well if they use multiple ones in a row. This really makes it a challenge in my opinion. So in general, while they seem quite useless, they were actually put in for a good reason. Number 1. Now, for our number 1, we will be looking at a type of Koopa Troopa that stands high above the rest in power, speed, endurance, and status. A mighty being that defeats all. Well, except Mario, because he can defeat almost anything, to be honest. Now, the enemy I'm talking about is the Hammer Bro, who are known as the elite of Bowser and the most powerful among them. They are Koopas that stand upright and throw hammers at you with quite a fast pace as well, making them incredibly dangerous. They were seen in many games, even the very first one, where along with Bowser, they were certainly the most powerful enemies. They also look quite different from the rest, having bigger shells than the normal Koopa Troopas, and they wear helmets. Now, anyone who has ever played a 2D Super Mario game knows about them. In general, Nintendo uses these enemies very well, with their attacks being a great counter to Mario's platforming moves. So getting past them can be really hard because of that, especially if you face multiple Hammer Bros at once. And that's what makes them so great. In a lot of Super Mario games, the enemies are quite weak, predictable, or just meh. But these never disappoint, and always force you to do your plan of attack perfectly, or you will die for sure. And Nintendo sometimes even places them at the end of a level, which is just evil, but certainly makes the level more exciting near the end of it. To be honest, I'm quite surprised Nintendo never introduced a general version of the enemy to act as a mini-boss. It would have fit perfectly in a game like New Super Mario Bros, where we see a million unique mini-bosses. So yeah, I like them because of the challenge they present. And even in more modern games like Super Mario Odyssey, they are fun to fight, and also fun to use when captured. You can attack fast with them and destroy almost anything. And when you play as one of them, you notice that in a lot of ways they are Mario's equal. They can jump high, are really fast, and their hammers deliver swift justice, putting them on the same level as Mario with a fire flower. And so, because of that, I like them the most. And everyone, don't forget, be sure to subscribe so you won't miss any future videos, and please leave a like, because it really helps.